Welcome to Trend Micro's Spotlight session, where we aim to shine a revealing light on the hidden dangers lurking in today's digital world. In each session, we bring together some leading voices from cybersecurity, government, and advocacy organizations to share real-world insights and some practical tips. And today, we're so pleased to be joined by Russell Slater from the National Council on Aging, where he is the Director of Corporate Partnerships. His work includes collaborating with corporate partners around scams prevention, digital literacy for older adults, and mental health awareness for older adults. Russell, can you tell us a little bit about the NCOA's mission? Maybe introduce yourself a bit further?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. First of all, I appreciate that, Marika. As Marika said, Russell Slater work with the National Council on Aging, and the National Council on Aging is the oldest national nonprofit organization in the United States, whose mission is to improve the lives of older adults. We were founded back in 1950. We're on to our 75th anniversary this year, so very exciting, and really focused on healthy aging as well as financial and economic security for older adults. And really excited for this conversation today to talk about fraud and cybersecurity and different trends that are out there. Certainly, this is a huge area of focus for the National Council on Aging, and look forward to this discussion.
Well, National Council on Aging has such a worthwhile mission, so we're really pleased to have you. Today, we're going to be discussing some of the results from Trend Micro's recent global survey, where we actually surveyed 6,000 adults across the globe, and we examined some consumer attitudes and behaviors toward online scams. And we actually uncovered some surprising misconceptions that we'd like to discuss with you, Russell. So we'd love to hear your perspective from the work you do at the NCOA, especially around supporting and educating older adults. So when people hear the term older adults, they often imagine retirees. How does the NCOA actually define this population, and what type of life stages or roles might this include?
Yeah, it's a good question. So at the National Council on Aging, we define the older adult as 55 and older. Certainly 55 and older, we're really focusing on a lot of different life stages for someone's life. Many times they're still active in the workforce, as they tend to get a little bit older, more into their 60s and certainly 70s, more retirees, as well as we're seeing more people go back to work part-time, for a variety of different reasons. It could be extra income, could be from a social isolation standpoint and wanting to be in community. A lot of different reasons. It's hard to kind of peg one size fits all, but it's a lot of different people as people continue to age. And it's an exciting time to be an older adult. There's so many great things out there in community, and looking forward to the technology and just being safe and making sure people are using the technology in a safe way.
So given that variety of roles that you see, do you find that those older adults are sometimes acting as sort of like helpers or tech helpers for friends and other loved ones within their families?
Yeah, there's a segment of older adults that have embraced the technology and are very tech savvy. And so for those folks who are tech savvy, in some ways they might be a caregiver to someone else in the family. They might be a mentor from a technology skills standpoint. And it's very interesting to see, especially since the pandemic, we've seen a pretty rapid increase in digital learning skills. And so as the older adult population continues to age and transition, we are seeing more digital literacy skills. And it's great to see. And we are seeing older adults in some cases really in that support role, and helping their friends, helping their neighbors, helping a loved one access technology and use it. So we are seeing more of that than we have even 5 or 10 years ago.
And often those folks in that age group that you mentioned, they're supporting parents at the same time as they may have teens at home, for example.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there's the sandwich generation. You have someone that's taking care of an older adult as well as taking care of their family as well, and young kids. But even older adults, as people continue to live longer, they're taking care of their parents in some cases. So you're seeing multi-generational families together, sometimes under one roof. Sometimes you just see them, they could be scattered all across the country, but technology is a way to bridge and connect that gap. But you do see multi-generations working together and communicating with each other.
So in your opinion, how important do you think it is for older adults to learn about scams and cybercrime, for example?
It's extremely important. It's an area that, as older adults continue to engage and embrace technology, the importance of education, the importance of understanding some of the pointers for scams and what to look for, it's vitally important. I just want to throw out a recent study that I came across where back in 2023, over folks that were over the age of 60 globally, $3.4 billion of fraud took place for people over the age of 60. So
Massive number.
that's a staggering number. And for that reason alone, it's so important to bring awareness and education to prevention of fraud and scams.
Wow. Yeah, those are big losses. And so I want to dip a little bit into our survey data. We actually found that we've surveyed folks globally, and it's all ages, 18 and over, that we surveyed. And we found that over a third of those respondents actually believe that you can only be scammed if you share too much online. So for example, you're posting a lot of information on social media. From your experience, why could that be a really dangerous assumption, especially for older adults?
Yeah, that's pretty dangerous. And that's interesting that that's what some of the data was showing. Certainly the more information you share, the more risk you're putting yourself at. But from a technology standpoint and scams and fraud, it doesn't take a lot of information. It's the information they're seeking. So, if many times if someone's asking for money through a wire transfer or using a gift card or a social security number, one or two pieces of information could make the difference in getting scammed or not. So it's not so much the amount of information. Certainly you want to be very conservative on your digital footprint, but you need to be extremely careful on what information, if any, that you decide to share online.
Yeah, and I imagine a lot of that information could easily be, lost to the dark web if there's a data breach where your information is held at a bank or a company or an insurer. If they experience a data breach, that information is just going to be online for people to find potentially. So even if you're
Absolutely.
not sharing it,
Yeah,
they
even if you're not sharing it, there's so many data breaches that happen across the world now all the time.
Mhm.
So there is information that's already out there in many cases. So you really don't want to feed into that. And you want to be very selective on what you share, who you share the information with, and how you share it.
And for those of you joining us live, I just want to point you toward the Q&A. If you're interested in submitting any questions to us as we're having this discussion, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A and we'll try to get them to Russell as we chat. So Russell, nearly half of our survey respondents also think that spotting, grammar or spelling errors is enough to identify a scam. However, this is quickly becoming a bit of a myth as scammers have access to these Gen AI tools that can write content with perfect grammar in many different languages without errors. So when you engage with older adults, do you see them relying on that type of cue, or do they recognize that scammers are getting more sophisticated?
I think it's a mixed bag. I think as more education is provided, I think more older adults are becoming more aware of what AI can do and some of the capabilities. Having said that, I think, I would say in most cases, the older adult doesn't really, doesn't truly understand sometimes how complex and how sophisticated AI is. AI is evolving. It's evolving extremely fast, and it's so hard to keep up with the different trends. So, for an older adult, they might in some cases, answer a question that someone poses in a chat or something and provides a voice answer. And without recognizing their voice might be their voice signature that could be repurposed later on down the road and used against them for, someone might have been accessing a different account. So I think people are starting to understand the impact of AI, but I also think there's a huge learning curve, and it really takes a village to bring it all together for the older adult audience.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What kinds of scams does the NCOA actually see the community being targeted by or becoming victims to the most?
So there's really four different types of scams that we see, probably a little bit more than others. Financial scams tend to be the most widespread, which could be, through banks or mortgages and things like that, where people are being approached and it seems legitimate, seems like a trusted source, a trusted organization, but they're really clever in how they present themselves. And so there are a lot of financial scams regarding mortgages and rent payments and things like that. That tends to be one of the larger areas of exposure for an older adult. I'd say its second area is the grandparent scam. And I'm not sure if someone's familiar with the grandparent scam, but that's more of that emotional relationship where maybe the older adult has someone kind of preys on them and is asking for maybe paying for gas and pretending to be their granddaughter or their grandson. And so as a grandparent, they want to support their family and they're thinking, oh, how quickly can I fund them some money? And unfortunately, the grandparent scam is really widespread. And that's an area that is deeply concerning. I think from a technology standpoint, we're seeing a lot more tech support type scams as older adults embrace digital tools. There's an opportunity for more tech support involvement. And so sometimes there's some activity with fake tech support requests and trying to access someone's hard drive remotely and things like that. So we're seeing a lot more of a tech support driven scams. And then the fourth one would be more government impersonations. So someone pretending to be maybe from the IRS or Social Security Administration or maybe related to Medicare. And so those are trusted institutions of the government. Older adults historically have put trust in those institutions. And so there may be a little bit, they let their guard down sometimes in those situations when they think they're getting something from the government officials. And so that's an area you really need to keep your guard up for, because many times it might not be the government. It might be
It's a
someone
really important reminder going into tax season, isn't it?
100%. Yeah, especially right now.
Mm-hmm. So we found that about 62% of participants that we surveyed, they think only easily fooled people become victims of something as specific as a romance scam, which is an interesting one to chat about. But can you describe what a romance scam might look like? And then what makes that belief problematic? That, do older adults face any stigma because of it?
Yeah, so it's interesting with a romance scam. So we find that certainly the older adults are impacted by romance scams, especially from a social isolation standpoint. Many times someone's living in a rural community or isolated, even in urban centers, and they're seeking friendship, they're seeking companionship, and they're building relationships online on the deep dark web in many cases. And unfortunately, they tend to let their guard down. And there are folks that are preying on older adults. They try to develop a trusted relationship with that individual to reach a point where they can start asking them to wire them some money, or, here's a gift card. Can you send me a gift card? I mean, all sorts of different things. But it really at its core has to do a lot with isolation and loneliness and not having a community of people that maybe they once had. And so through technology, they're seeking that. And so that's something that really older adults and caregivers need to balance that piece because it is a growing piece for
And
older
many
adults.
of us see connection online. Folks of all ages are on these dating apps, but yet there's this persistent perception that if you happen to become a victim of a scammer's, quite clever tactics online, that, oh, it's just because you were gullible, you were easily fooled. So that's a bit of a problem, I would think, that perception. Would you agree?
It is. And so it's interesting. So when an older adult gets scammed, they're more likely to share that they were scammed if it was through some type of financial institution or a government scam or something like that. But when you're talking about a romance scam, the data has shown people are a little bit less likely to share that they were scammed. I think a lot of it has to do with their relationships really struggling, like, oh, I really trusted that individual and they're hurt, they're upset, and that emotional attachment to the person. And also there's the part of being ashamed. They feel ashamed, like, how did I get fooled by X, Y, and Z? And so I think from a romance scam standpoint, I think older adults don't always share that piece. I think they're more likely to share when it's a different type of scam.
So how do we break that cycle potentially of older adults suffering in silence?
It's really hard. It's a really hard thing to break, but there's good news. There's good news. So for older adults, we believe at the National Council on Aging, knowledge is power. And so from a knowledge standpoint in education, there are tools that are out there to help older adults. And so with organizations like yourself at Trend, we want to be able to get the message out there of here are some clues to look for as you're navigating your relationships online or as you're working on your banking and things like that. There's certain things you should always look for. There's certain rules you should put in place as you're managing your daily communication. And if you put some best practices in place, hopefully you're setting yourself up for a productive and safe use of the internet.
And I believe the NCOA, they provide members in community with kinds of programming. So what sorts of things do you offer that might support older adults with their digital literacy and knowing where to go if this happens to them?
Yeah, it's a good question. So at the National Council of Aging, we do a lot of work in community. We have over 2,700 senior center affiliates that we work with across the United States. And at our senior centers, we do a lot of local programming on a variety of topics. Actually, this year we are focusing on a digital literacy campaign to help train older adults on how to use different digital tools. We're training 10,000 older adults by later this spring and well on our way to doing that. But part of that includes some training as it relates to fraud and cybersecurity of just what to be aware for what's out there. And so part of our education and working in community is making sure people have the resources at their, right in front of them. So things that are important to older adults, we want to share and get the message out there of, don't rely on things like caller ID. Caller ID was great back in its day, but a lot of people have been really scammed because of caller ID. So there's a lot of different things out there right now that we recommend, how to manage robocalls and things like that. There's so many different types of scams that are out there. So through our workshops and community, that's where we try to really help people on the ground, give them the tools and resources to manage scams prevention and fraud protection.
That's fantastic. It sounds like a very empowering program. And on that caller ID note, we see scams coming through all the time where even well-known numbers are being spoofed, meaning the scammer is mimicking a number you think you know. So you think a trusted person is calling you, or maybe a business, or, hey, this is Google, or this is somebody that, I know, or my bank. And it's actually the cyber criminal who's hijacked that identification as it's coming through on your phone. So you think you're speaking to somebody that you're not, right?
Yeah, you really do. There's so people can be so clever in how they try to spook you. And one of the things that we always recommend is having that kind of safety plan in place ahead of time. So, you have your trusted source of phone numbers of who's going, what's the phone number from the bank? What's the phone number from, Social Security number? You also know people that are going to call you if someone's going to ask you about wiring money or I need a gift card, any type of financial transaction and someone approaches you, that light bulb needs to go off and say, you know what? I need to slow down, ask some more questions, and also, check my records. Is this the right phone number? Or I can go on to do a quick Google search and say, is this the right address? Is this the right, double check and verify everything. Just don't take everything at face value.
Because those scammers are really trying to make things feel urgent, right? Like you need to act right now. You need to do this right now. Something's at stake. Access has been lost. Somebody's in trouble. They really try to make you feel like you need to rush, don't they?
100%. And that's probably the number one factor for an older adult is they try to create a sense of urgency. There's a reason why you need to wire the money today. There's a reason why you need to pay your rent today, or your electric bill. And so anytime someone is putting that sense of urgency around you, we would take that as a red flag and then pause, gather some more information. Don't commit to anything right then, and double check your records. But you're right, they do try to create that sense of urgency, almost of panic, and trying to get someone to do something quickly. And in many cases, an older adult, they're wired to, I want to help, I want to take care of someone, I want to help someone in my family. And
It's
and
with
so
good intentions, right?
it's human nature to want to help and give. And so, but that's where you need to provide that education and just say, let's take a step back.
So actually in our study, we found that only a very small minority have had like proactive discussions with their loved ones about what to do in these moments or what to do if they're scammed. So why do you think those conversations are important to have ahead of time, and how can we help older adults initiate them?
So you're right. I think knowledge is power. The more that you can educate before someone is scammed, the better, because they have the tools, the resources to ask better questions, to understand some of the red flags, the warning signs that are out there. Like, as you said, someone tries to create a sense of urgency. That's usually a red flag. Also trying to make you donate something, or sometimes they think they're a trusted organization, but somehow the name looks slightly different than the name that you're used to. So there's a lot of copycat people out there that are trying to really, unfortunately make it a really difficult situation. So I think education is power to do that up front. Why there's always been kind of a stigma of talking about it, but I think as more older adults embrace the technology and use it for their banking and for communicating with their loved ones, it's a really important conversation to have. And it's like anything, it's just part of your planning. It needs to become part of your daily living because, as I said at the beginning, over $3.4 billion of fraud took place back in 2023 for people over the age of 60. And that was up, I think, about 11 or 12% from the prior year. So this is a huge problem, and it continues to grow.
So if we've been kind of speaking to older adults here, but if you are a person supporting an older adult, maybe you're a family member, a friend, a loved one, how could you support them to, and like, how do you initiate these kinds of conversations? How do you talk about this without making them feel singled out?
It's a good question. I think one of the things to do is come from a place of trust, as you're talking to, if you're a caregiver and you're working with an older adult, as you're having conversations, maybe going over your monthly budget or planning, something else retirement related. You want to include this as part of that conversation. You want this to be integrated into your retirement planning conversation as well as your daily living. It needs to become part of your daily living, because with AI and the rapid pace of the technology changing, you need to really stay up to speed on what are the pointers, what are the signals of things you need to be aware of, and take the steps to protect yourself and your family. So I think coming from a place of trust is always the place to start. I think obviously you don't want to scare anybody, but at the same time, you want to lay out the facts of what's out there today and why you really need to consider taking steps to protect yourself.
Any conversation starters you could suggest around the dinner table tonight for folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is to talk about, as at the dinner table and you talk about maybe, someone like phone calls that happen at the dinner table. How many times at night do you get the calls at 5, 6 o'clock, and it's the robocalls and things like that? And, I think that's usually an opportunity right there. That's a good teaching moment. And you can say to your loved one, so let's, who's calling at 6 o'clock? Look at the caller ID. Does that match with who said they're going to call, or vice versa? There's a lot of things you can look at, but you start to see some patterns and some trends at different times of the evening. So something to be aware of. But I think integrating it into your conversations, not that you're having conversations once in a while, but it becomes part of your routine as you're talking to your loved one about bills and paying your bills and double checking your statements. Just gradually lead in different conversations related to this topic.
It's an act of love, I think, to raise awareness when you notice a new kind of scam or it's coming
Yeah.
through your channels, to talk to your family about it. Like, hey, did you notice there's this new thing? It's coming through my phone. It looks like this. There's these new scams that are about the tolls, for example, toll road scams that are coming through our SMS in our messages. So I do think it's showing care and concern for the people around us if we talk about it. I think it's great advice, Russell.
Yeah, and you can weave it into different times of the year. So back in the fall during the US elections, there was a lot of, texting that was taking place and giving money to different places. And I think that was an opportunity to talk to your loved ones. And so even now, thinking about tax season, this is an opportunity. There's a lot of texting that's going on out there now, and different information. In the fall, there'll be open enrollment season with Medicare and Medicaid and things like that. And, depending on the types of season, that's another opportunity to revisit this topic.
Absolutely. So another thing that we learned is that a majority this time, so like 74% of the folks that we surveyed, they said it's worth reporting a scam if it happens to you, which is really great news. But that still leaves 25% who just aren't convinced. So how do we encourage more people, especially older adults, to come forward, report, seek help?
Yeah, so one of the things that we recommend is providing a list of resources of who to report scams and fraud to, like the FTC. That's or your local police department, the FTC, some cases the FBI. We want people to feel empowered, and they should want to report this information, because the more information that's out there, then the professionals can investigate these things and try to shut things down as quickly as possible. So it's really in everyone's interest to report when they are scammed, and hopefully that will lead to protecting the good people and making sure everyone's safe. And so we do recommend reporting things to the FTC and other reputable organizations.
And for those who aren't sure, the FTC is the Federal Trade Commission,
Yes,
and they've got wonderful resources, I believe,
they
on
do. They have a
reporting.
lot of resources around scams and fraud, and excellent FAQs as well.
And how would somebody find that reporting site? Would they just do a Google search?
Yeah, they could just do a quick Google search for the FTC. It will come up, and they should be all set. And they can also, so that's a great place, but also going to the National Council on Aging. We have tremendous resources as well. If you go to ncoa.org, go to our site, we have a whole section on fraud and scams. And there's a series of different articles and resources and links for older adults for accessing different tools as well.
It's really wonderful. Great for folks to know. So there's often this narrative of vulnerability when we speak about older adults and online safety. So how could we shift this to one of agency and capability? Can you recommend one step that older adults can take to feel more in control of their lives online?
Yeah, I mean, I think for older adults, to feel that control and empowerment, I really think since the pandemic, I think that's been the mantra for older adults is that, you know, technology can be great, and we just have to use it in a wise and effective way because there's so many incredible things that come out of using technology. And for an older adult, especially someone with social isolation and not having the friendships, there's a lot that you can do building a community with technology. So, you know, from our perspective, we want people to embrace technology, feel empowered. We also say, you know, take baby steps. It's not something that you need to become an expert overnight. You know, start small, get educated, and get comfortable and meet yourself where you're at. Don't overwhelm yourself, but use technology in a wise, safe way. But start small and empower yourself. And you know, there's so many great things that can come out of it. And ask questions. You know, don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask questions to your loved ones, to your siblings, to your family members. You know, if you're not sure of something, it's okay to say, I don't know. And go to people that have the expertise that can answer the right questions for you. That's one of the hardest things is people are afraid to ask for help
Right.
and they're
And I
not
think
sure where
family
to
members are
navigate.
often really happy to help. They're happy to do that because
100%.
they
Yeah,
love that
it's
person in their family.
yeah, 100%. And so the more, you know, the more that you can do to ask questions will empower you and certainly build your confidence.
So we're going to be speaking to more experts worldwide, sometimes about these survey findings, but also just about the scam landscape as well. And from the NCOA's perspective, are there any pressing issues that you'd really want to see addressed to be able to protect older adults from digital threats?
Yeah, one of them, and I brought this up earlier, tech support. That this is an area that is certainly continues to grow. I think as older adults use digital tools, there's more, they're more open to, you know, tech support, fake tech support scams. And that's an area that we see that's growing and people accessing, you know, someone's computer or clicking on a different Windows screen. And so, you know, I think for older adults, the more that we can help them as the technology continues to change, how we can get in front of it and make it as easy and safe as possible. You know, what tools are out there to protect older adults through different, you know, antivirus software? What can we do to put on someone's machines and digital devices to make things as foolproof as they can? Because unfortunately, the scammers are very clever and very creative and they seem to be one or two steps ahead a lot of the time. So the more that we can proactively help with the right software and safeguards, I think that will be a big part of it. And I also think just getting back to the education piece, because if we can really keep it simple and focus on education and what to look for, specifically as it relates to protecting yourself, like knowing some of those signs and really focusing on if someone's being urgent and pressing you for information or for financial transaction, those are real pointers that you're probably looking at something that could be a scam. And so pausing, taking a breath, getting off that call, not responding to someone via email, those are the things that we're looking for. And so I think that digital education piece will continue to be extremely important and it's going to continue to evolve, especially with AI really changing the landscape so quickly.
Yeah, and I do see that it is up to individuals to seek out that education and awareness and to kind of make it part of their daily routines and habits to keep up to date on what those scams might look like. They're coming from all different angles. But then I also see organizations like the NCOA putting education in front of older adults, and various government organizations like the FTC, they're doing the same. Certainly Trend Micro is very keen on making sure people's awareness is raised to what scams can look like. And obviously, we love that you're talking about the tech tools because we agree. We think it's very important. You just really can't stay safe 100% of the time as scammers are becoming so sophisticated. Even our threat researchers are saying it's going to happen eventually because the scale of scams coming down the pipeline is just going to increase with AI's help. And so it's important that we protect ourselves with anti-scam software, antivirus software, identity theft protection, et cetera. So we've got products like that we're able to offer to the general public. And we do see it's that interplay of education as well as the right tools in your pocket on those devices you're using.
Yeah, we agree 100%. It's that education piece, and then companies like Trend that have the right tools and software to make a difference. Yeah.
So before we close, would you like to share one key piece of advice or a resource? I know you've been giving us quite a bit and some really great gems, but maybe something that our listeners and our viewers can take away, maybe something from the NCOA that you want them to know about in particular.
Yeah, one thing, and this goes back to romance scams, because it is a growing area, and we touched on it earlier, but I think there's a level of embarrassment and sometimes shame, getting caught in a romance scam. And so that's an area where we want to really empower the older adult to say, you're not alone. This happens to someone across all different ages. People are very clever, they're very well calculated and very intentional in what they try to do to you. And so we want you not to feel embarrassed. We want you to report it. We want you to report that up to the police department and other organizations, because these folks that are doing these terrible things, they're a threat to the community. And we don't want you to feel alone, because you're not alone in those situations. And we know, obviously, that's taking a huge emotional toll as you invested a lot of time in that relationship. And so we think that's an area we want you to come and talk about it and feel heard, and know that this is something it's bigger than just you. It's a broad issue, and it takes a village of people like Trend and other organizations to help make a difference and support you.
Thank you so much, Russell. We really value your input, your insights, especially around a conversation as important as this. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for doing the work that you do to support older adults across the country. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. And thank you to those who have joined us. We've been sort of taking some of those Q&A questions as they've been popping up and giving them to Russell. So we hope you'll join us again next time as we meet with another guest. Keep your eyes peeled on social media for our posts where you can grab the link and join us live. And we hope to see you again soon.